If you've spent the last few evenings scrolling through endless listings, comparing copier scanner combos, and still feel like you might end up with something that either sits idle or breaks down the minute you need it, this review is here to cut through the noise. I've been in the market for a small office machine myself, read the spec sheets, watched a handful of unboxing videos, and even dug through a few forum threads where people vented about jammed paper and confusing network setups. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What follows is the kind of breakdown you'd get from a real-world day in the office, not a glossy brochure. First off, the Canon imageCLASS 2300n is positioned as a digital network multifunction copier, which basically means it can print, copy, and scan while being reachable from any computer on your local network. For a team of 3 to 5 people who share a single workspace, that's the sweet spot. You get a dedicated machine that isn't a giant beast eating up floor space, yet it still talks to Windows and macOS without needing a separate USB cable every time someone wants to print a document. The N in the model name stands for network, and that's the first practical win. You can set it up once on your router, drop the IP address into the printer settings on each workstation, and you're good to go. In my own testing, the initial configuration took about 10 minutes. The built-in LCD guided me through the Ethernet connection, and once the device was on the network, I could send a print job from my laptop in under a second. Now, let's talk about the actual day-to-day tasks you'll be throwing at this machine. If you run a small consulting firm that prints client contracts, scans signed paperwork, and occasionally needs a quick two-sided copy, the 2300n handles those chores with minimal fuss. The copy function, for example, defaults to a single-sided black and white output, which is fine for most internal documents. When I needed a double-sided copy, I pressed the duplex button on the front panel and the machine automatically flipped the paper. There was no need to manually refeed the stack, which saves a few seconds per job and eliminates the common jam-prone moment when you try to feed paper back in the wrong orientation. Scanning is where the network capability really shines. Instead of attaching a USB cable and waiting for the scan to appear on your desktop, the 2300n can push the file directly to a shared folder on your server or email it to a designated address. I set up a Scantomail profile for my personal Gmail, and each time I hit scan, the device prompted me for the destination. The resulting PDFs were clear enough for contracts and receipts, and the file size stayed reasonable because the machine defaults to a 300 dpi setting, which is more than sufficient for text-heavy documents. If you need higher resolution for graphic-heavy files, you can bump the DPI up, but you'll notice the scan takes longer and the file size inflates, something to keep in mind if you have limited bandwidth or storage. One of the hidden trade-offs with the 230n is the toner consumption pattern. Canon's laser technology is known for crisp text, but the toner cartridge is sized for a modest office volume, roughly a few thousand pages before you need a replacement. In my experience, printing a batch of 150-page client proposals over a week used about 15% of the cartridge, which is perfectly fine if you're printing under 2,000 pages a month. However, if you run a design studio that regularly outputs large PDFs, color prints, or high-resolution images, even though the 230n is monochrome, you'll find yourself ordering replacement cartridges more frequently, and that adds up. The upside is that the cartridge is a standard Canon unit, so you can source it from most office supply stores without hunting for a proprietary part. Another practical consideration is the paper handling. The 230n comes with a 250-sheet main tray and a 100-sheet bypass tray. For a team that prints occasional reports, the main tray's capacity is generous enough to go a whole day without refilling. The bypass tray is handy for envelopes or specialty media. I slipped a few letter-size envelopes through it to print meeting invitations, and the machine fed them without any hiccups. The only snag I encountered was with heavier cardstock. The rollers struggled a bit, leading to occasional feed errors. If your workflow includes frequent printing on cardstock or labels, you might want to look at a model with a reinforced paper path. So, who should actually buy the imageCLASS 230n? In a nutshell, it's ideal for small businesses, home offices, or even a dedicated department in a larger company that doesn't need color output, but does need reliable network printing, copying, and scanning. If you have a team of 26 people, a modest monthly print volume, and you value a straightforward setup over a mountain of advanced features, this machine fits like a glove. It also works well for educators who need to print worksheets and scan student assignments, because the Scantomail function eliminates the need for